All right, hello, and welcome to our podcast on satire, yet another one of our many important literary terms that we're going to be looking at throughout the year, but a pretty complicated one in terms of its subtlety. And I think a lot of people don't really understand satire. They tend to read it incorrectly. So we wanted to go ahead and try to explain this a little bit better so you can better understand it. So what is satire? A pretty standard definition is the idea of using a variety of methods or techniques to make something look foolish or silly in order to point out faults or in order to seek social change. And so to kind of break that down a little bit, I think we have the idea of satire is oftentimes sort of comical, sort of funny, and that is the whole idea of making something look foolish or silly. And so then the point of making things look silly or foolish is to point out faults. So where the author of the text might see something's going wrong in society or with a certain institution or with a person or with some sort of text or something, and then might be wanting to say, hey, I think there's something wrong with this. And so they're just pointing out faults. In addition, the author of satire might actually want to go a step further to not only point out a fault, but then to ask for social change. And so the idea of satire is that we're going to use a bunch of different techniques, which we'll show you a little bit later on, oftentimes to make something a little funny. But then the point is to say, hey, I think there's something wrong with this, and or to go a step further, not only is there something wrong, but we would need to see something change. And so that is kind of what satire is. So why is understanding the definition of satire and satire itself even important? This is another way that authors reveal their themes. As we are reading a variety of texts, we need to be able to put together all of these tools that we're seeing, all of these different methodologies, and be able to say, okay, what's the point of this text? What's the theme of this text? And oftentimes, as you'll see in the next couple slides, it's a relatively straightforward progression from idea to theme. The challenge with satire is that it often seems a little bit backwards. So follow along in the next couple slides and see what I mean. I think in some texts, themes are expressed explicitly. For example, Aesop's fables, those old Greek tales, that at the end of them, the author has written exactly what you are supposed to learn from this story. So for example, the Fox and the Grapes story, where the fox comes across some grapes that are just out of his reach. And he keeps trying, and then eventually he says, who cares, they're too far, I can't get them. And then he makes an excuse. The fox says, I don't want those grapes anyway, they were probably sour. So the fox excuses away his behavior, his giving up, and tries to pin it on somebody else, the sour grapes. Oftentimes, the author or the editors of Aesop's fables are going to tell you explicitly what you were supposed to have learned from that story. So at the end of The Fox and the Grapes, there's something like, and the lesson goes that patience is rewarded. Oh, okay. I was supposed to get that the fox should have been more patient. Therefore, I should learn as a universal truth, I need to be patient. Okay. That text explicitly tells me what I'm supposed to know. Another style of expressing theme is what I think many of the texts we read in class are. The authors use literary elements to subtly and over the course of a novel, reveal that theme. For example, Ken Kesey, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, using motifs and the tracking and the patterns of these motifs to reveal his theme, his message about society. The Things They Carried, Tim O'Brien uses the idea of metafiction to express his theme, the idea of Christian imagery, the idea of a reliable or unreliable narrator. So there seems to be a steadily forward, straightforward progress being made toward the revelation of theme. If we put together all of the pieces that the author is leaving for us, we should be able to create the puzzle picture at the end. And I think that's what happens most times in most of the texts that we're reading. The challenge with satire, though, is that it seems like on the level, the text is talking about A, but the point of the author is different from that. And so this becomes exceptionally difficult because we're reading things like A Modest Proposal or Twain pieces or studying Colbert or Candide. We look at this and we say, it seems like on the level they're saying that we should spend more in government. The challenge becomes that as a reader, we might be missing the subtle cues or techniques, which we'll show you in a second, that actually point us in the opposite direction. So this is where satire kind of takes a U-turn, where it seems like it's going in direction A, but their true meaning and their true theme is in the opposite direction. And this is especially difficult for young, inexperienced, unpracticed readers, because they look at it and they say, well, wait a second, all the words on the page say we should eat children in order to solve the nation's problem with poverty. How am I supposed to get that he actually means the opposite? And that's where these techniques come in, and so this is something that we'll look at. So how do I find satire? I think it's important, number one, that you know the types and the techniques that authors actually use. And that's what this slideshow will walk you through, is how do they do it? We then, number two, need to commit to read actively. If we're just moving our eyes over the paper and kind of fake reading, as I call it, we're going to miss the satirical elements. We're going to miss the sarcasm. And so, if we don't read actively and look at all of the clues, we will miss satire. So one, we have to know them. Two, we have to look for them. And then three, we have to put it all together and say, it seems like this author is using the technique of exaggeration. Now put that all together and try to deduce meaning. Why would he or she be doing that? What is his or her point? What is his or her theme? And then once we've done that, then we're a little bit closer to figuring out why satire, how it works, and what their point is. So the first part to look at are the different types of satire. And kind of the way to divide these up is the idea of light satire or heavy satire. So the first part is Horatian satire, and we call this the light satire, where you're kind of holding up a mirror saying, do you see how silly you look? This is not the best way to do something, or there might be something wrong here. It's kind of satire while smiling, is the way I like to think of it. Light, humorous, funny. Maybe the first time a student is late for class, I might use sarcasm a little bit and say, hey, you're on time. And just kind of gently poke at them, sending the light message of, you might want to show up. Just trying to hold up a mirror to say, hey, do you realize you're late? Let's go ahead and fix that. But we're going to use verbal irony or sarcasm to satirize the student who is late. Another type of satire, though, is what we call juvenalian, and this is what I call the heavy satire or angry satire. This is really pointing out these issues to society and really getting angry about something. It's like the tone has changed. And for me, it's like the student who's come late for the 1,000th time in their career. I'm tired of joking with them and trying to gently point out that they should get there on time. We might say very heavy-handedly something like, only the best show up on time. I'm so glad that you're the best. Now I've gone from this light Horatian satire of, hey, you might want to show up on time, to a very heavy-handed, mean, sarcastic pointing out to the student of, get your butt to class on time. And so the tone changes. Horatian satire is very light, maybe fluffy, and then we move to that juvenalian satire, which is very heavy and pointed and almost angry with whatever's going wrong or with whatever the author wants to see changed. So these are the techniques that we'll be talking about in the next couple slides. There's the list in front of you. You can see exaggeration, irony, burlesque, incongruity, reversal, and parody. And so within all of these techniques, they can both be used in a light or in a heavy manner. So they can both be used as Horatian or juvenalian. So you can kind of have that little flow chart of things. We have to figure out, are they being light? Are they being heavy? And then once we figure out kind of what their tone is, which of these techniques are they using in order to move forward